Ah, greetings, friends.
Mostly enemies.
What's up, dudes and dudettes, readers, writers, and everything in between? I'm back. Not back, like I'm still dealing with a bunch of life stuff, but, I'm posting a video, so, give me a break. So, there's been a lot of talk in my writing, my AuthorTube circle lately about what makes something good or bad. There's been a lot of debate about it. And I think the entire community really would benefit from a serious intellectual discussion about what makes a piece of writing good or bad. Me and my friend Cait over at Writer Uninterrupted, link down in the description, we had an entire episode about quality and how taste grievances are not an objective measure of quality. But I wanted to make my own video about it. I know probably only a few of you go and watch her channel, which if you don't watch my friend Cait's channel, what's wrong with you? You should, especially me and her's joint show. You're missing out. Especially when we get the second season going and the production quality comes up. That's in the works, but anyways, I'm getting off track. So anyways, what makes something objectively good? And when does a matter of subjective, when does a matter of opinion kind of elevate to the objective level? And when do objective things kind of get bogged down by subjectives? So let's talk about that a bit. But before we do talk about it, I just want to say really quick, the sequel for The Garden of Lies is going to be coming out in October for sure. I have the cover. Final edit is right almost about to be done. It's probably going to be released the day before Halloween. More details to come on that. If you haven't checked out my debut novel, The Garden of Lies, what are you waiting for? It's got great reviews on Goodreads. Everyone who picks it up says they like it, with a few notable exceptions. Seriously, if you like fantasy, you'll like it. I'm just about willing to promise. Alright, on to the video. So first, let's talk about what makes something objectively good in terms of writing. I'm gonna need some jungle juice for this one. That's good aqua. So I think it goes without saying, and I think almost everyone could agree, that one of the primary things that makes writing good or bad is a mastery of the language it's in. If you can't make it through a sentence because the syntax is garbage, the grammar makes no sense, or it's run on because there's no use of punctuation, it's bad writing. Even if the person is saying something interesting, you would never know because they're not communicating it effectively. If you're a writer, it's pivotal that you gain a mastery of the syntax and grammar rules that govern the language you write in. Punctuation is also very important, but thankfully we have this thing called editors. So punctuation tends to not be as critical in my opinion, but it's still something you should have a solid grasp on. Okay? When you don't have a solid grasp on these things and you attempt to write in the language, it shines through to a native speaker like that. It shines through to someone who has an education in the language like that. And even people who have a more casual understanding of the language are still going to catch a good chunk of your errors and say, that just doesn't seem right. And it's going to leave a bad taste in their metaphorical mouth. Master the language. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. I promise. Now, my second point here on objective that I want to make, yes, I accidentally raised 3 fingers at first, is the depth of the writing. So, depending on how you frame this and how you interpret those words, you could argue that this would fall under subjective. But the way I'm framing it here, it's mostly an objective measure of quality, okay? For example, if you're reading a nonfiction book and the author of said book tries to tell you that rocks can talk, or that methamphetamine is good for people, or say experimental treatment which was discontinued from animal testing because all the animal subjects kept dying in record numbers, If an author of any kind of writing in nonfiction is trying to tell you that kind of nonsense, you know they're probably not telling you the truth, or they're not intelligent. If they're not telling you the truth, why are you listening to them? And if they're not intelligent, why are you listening to them in matters regarding an intellectual topic? They're not worth your attention in any kind of serious manner. If you know that someone is telling you something that isn't true, or it just smells like BS and you research it and it's not true, you have an obligation to stand up and say, this is BS. This is trash. Don't let people tell you what to believe. And don't let people tell you what is and isn't good. Think for yourself, form an opinion, and say your opinion. And then the third point that I want to hit as being a solid, objective measure of quality is a writer's scope of knowledge. Does the writer demonstrate real-world knowledge? Does that real-world knowledge shine through in their writing? Some good examples of common problems with gaps in writers' knowledge are when writers write sex scenes and it's very obvious that they have no idea how one gender or the other's reproductive anatomy works. That's a very common problem that I hear about. Another one is having no grasp of physics. Writers writing about stuff and they just write these absurd things and the physics of it is just nonsense. Another one is when writers try to write stuff about this culture or that culture and it's a tired, really stupid stereotype or trope or cliche because the writer doesn't actually know anything about that culture. All of these and more stem from a lack of knowledge on the part of the writer. We as readers hate it, and we as writers are often guilty of it. Stay in your lane in terms of knowledge, okay? If you don't know about something, it would behoove you to research it before you go writing about it. If you're too lazy to research something before you write about it, it's going to shine through, and your readers will punish you for it. So let's just agree that you shouldn't do it, okay? All right, cool. Now, when we move into things that are subjective and matters of opinion, this is where the debate really heats up, in my opinion. And this is where a lot of people need to just swallow a little bit of crow, admit they're wrong, and have a little bit of humility, which is something every person on this planet could use a little bit more of, okay? No one is perfect, no one is infallible, and we all need to remind ourselves of that and open ourselves up to the possibility that we could be wrong. I don't like being proven wrong, but I have the balls required to admit when I am proven wrong. And I would say that is the bare minimum that people should have, okay? Don't go around saying you're open-minded and then be completely unwilling to be open to the possibility that you're wrong about something, because that's not what being open-minded is. So the first thing that is a subjective matter is the human element. Does the writing sound like a person? Or does it sound like a robot? Does it have a sense of humor? Does it have a sense of empathy? Does the writing evoke any emotion at all? Obviously, this is going to vary person to person, and the human element is going to vary a lot based on things like nationality, culture, age group, and these kinds of things. But there are some things that are universally human. We all understand anger, we all understand loss, we all understand sadness, we all understand lust and love, okay? There are universal threads of humanity that you can play to as a writer. So, those are often good threads to pluck when you're trying to make your writing human. However, just because writing does or doesn't have that human component doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. But there is a certain amount of wisdom of the crowd element here. If 90% of people say that your writing is robotic and bad, your writing is probably robotic and bad. If 50% of people say that your writing is robotic and you have no voice and all that other stuff, but then 50% of people identify with your writing just fine and feel the emotion and all that stuff, it's subjective. 90% of people say it's robotic, it moves into objective. Okay? These are things that we have to engage with the nuance of the thing, okay? The next thing in subjective, it's closely related to the last topic, okay? This one is negative emotions. Like I said, in the same vein as the last point, if something makes you feel bad, that by itself does not necessarily mean that the thing itself is bad. The fact of the matter is, sometimes the truth hurts, but the truth is not bad for you. Never. I would definitely argue the truth is never bad for you. You might not like it, but it's good for you. Some characters or people are naturally abrasive. That doesn't mean they're bad people. And just because you think a particular series of events or a plot line or a method of doing something is silly or stupid or unrealistic doesn't mean it is. It's really important that we, as readers and writers, always seek to understand both the things that we criticize and the people that we criticize. When we criticize from a position of ignorance, we almost invariably make ourselves look like idiots. Don't do that to yourself. Make sure you know about the thing you're talking about. Another thing that firmly falls under subjective, not an objective measure of quality. I don't like this point of view. Just because something is written in a POV you don't like does not mean it's bad writing. Sorry, it just doesn't. This really should be one of those things that's obvious. I shouldn't even have to say this, but if you go through Goodreads and read reviews, it becomes obvious that it's not obvious. So I felt the need to say it. Next thing, I don't like the tense that this author writes in. See the explanation about the last point. And then finally, slang versus proper language. Just because someone uses slang, or never uses it, it doesn't mean they're a poor writer. The measure of a writer's use of language is whether or not they can effectively communicate what they want to say to the majority of people. And oftentimes, we as humans, flawed as we are, we project our lack of understanding about something onto the person communicating, onto the person who wrote the thing we're reading. And that's not fair. It is vital that you seek to understand language and you seek to increase your scope of knowledge so that you can understand what people say to you, not that you demand people dumb themselves down. If you find yourself shouting at someone to say it in plain English, but they insist they are saying it in plain English, it's probably you who needs to learn a few things. That's just the hard reality of it. So, now that I've ruffled plenty of feathers, now that I've pissed plenty of people off and maybe made a few people unsubscribe from my channel, like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. Like I said, check out my debut novel, The Garden of Lies. If you're one of those people who's always looking for a deal, there is going to be a sale on the ebook leading up to the release of the second book. I just don't have a hard date for you yet, but that sale is going to be coming. It's going to be a very steep discount as a celebration for the release of my sequel. So keep your eyes out for that. And in the meantime, guys, be well, be kind, be strong. I'll see you guys next time.